How are you?
Good, thank you. So excited to have our second Business Acumen webinar session. So tonight we've got a special guest. So one of my former classmates back in the days at UCT. So he's currently at SciCam, but he'll get to introduce himself even more, and you'll get to just know what he does and also some of the exciting things that he's got to share. So his name is Msizi, and we'll just be unpacking some of the developments that you might be seeing around, and you might have been wondering where really do they fit in into our profession? Where do they fit in terms of me as a professional? Do I need to know all these things? Does it matter whether I'm in audit or anywhere else? So technology, as you will appreciate, has become a very important part of our lives, whether in our working environment or personally. And sometimes as professional, we need to understand what is its role in our day-to-day. And I think there's always questions around new developments in terms of whether they are there to take our jobs or whether to enhance the way we actually do our jobs. So this is something that Msizi will be unpacking with you tonight. So he's quite excited to be here, and I told him that you are very engaging. So he's looking forward to any of the thoughts that you might have. And please feel free to engage with him, ask as many questions as you would like, and I'm sure this will bound to be useful sometime going forward. Msizi, welcome and thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Rendani. So I'm going to share my screen, and I promise I will switch off my video as soon as I'm done with the introduction. Where's this slide? Sorry, I'm just trying to. Okay, so thanks again, Rendani, and good evening, everybody. Like Rendani has mentioned, I'm going to be talking to you guys about some of the developments in the digital technology space. And I'm sure that you are also impacted in many ways, or you are seeing what is happening and you are experiencing. So I'm hoping that we will have an interactive session or conversation. Please feel free to stop me at any time. If it's okay with you, because I'm sharing my slide on presentation mode, you can just shout and then I'll stop at any point. I've got about 20 slides that I'd like to go through. It is a lot of information that I've tried to cram into. In fact, I wanted to do less. So there might be a slide maybe that we don't spend too much time on because I will be keeping track of time. So just briefly, like Rendani mentioned, in fact, we did study together at UCT. My name is Msizi. I'm a member of SciCa. I do also work at SciCa currently as a project director. I work mostly, so previously I worked with enabling competencies for the past 2 years. Recently, I changed to look at research and thought leadership and insights that SciCa wants to create. And I focus on the public sector as well as technology primarily. So those are my two areas that I look at, and that's why this is an exciting conversation for me to have, because it's something that I get to interact with almost on a daily. I did get a master's at UKZN a while back now, and I think that helped me with my research skills. And I know at this level that you also expected to do a bit of research as part of your studies and your development. So what you'll see when we have a look at some of these things, a lot of it is still under development. It's still very, very early stages. So we need to try and understand what is coming, especially if we're looking from a technology perspective. Of course, we do interact with it on a daily. There's a lot of things that are already there and in place. But if we look at most of the research that's out there, it's definitely saying that we are really in the early stages. Before coming to SAICA, I worked as an academic, so I lecture external auditing, or I lectured external auditing. I do still do it part-time. I also worked in learning and development, and I have worked at both EY as well as the AGSA. I think how I probably got to where I am today is a while back. I think it was probably 2018, 17, when SAICA first started working on the CA 2025 competency framework. I was a part of, and I remember the first presentation, I was so confused about where all of this thing is going. And to be honest, I wasn't quite convinced. But I think a year or so later, then I was invited to be a part of the competency framework working group at SAICA, where I really got to understand where SAICA and the future of the profession is going. I was part of that for about, I think, 2 years until it was finalized. I think it was early 2021 that it was finalized, and then it was released for everyone to now implement. And that's why we are talking today about technology and how it's affecting you, your work, and your future, and the future of the profession, and many other things, really. One, I think, highlight that I do like to share about my life is I was a member of I was a Mandela Washington Fellow in 2017. It was an exciting program where we got to learn, and I think it was Obama was still the president at the time. We got to learn a bit about how certain things are run in the States. It was an exciting program. Okay, so I'm gonna turn off my camera now, and then I'm gonna continue or start with the presentation. Again, if at any time you'd like me to stop to have a conversation about something or have a question, please feel free to stop me. But I will just try for now until we do have a dedicated time at the end where we'll have questions. But again, at any time, feel free to stop me. Okay, if I can just okay. So what are we going to try and do? So I'm going to provide a brief background, and then we're going to talk about some of the technologies, and there's a lot that is happening, and you will have seen a few of them or some of them, but there's really a lot that is happening in terms of digital technology. We're not going to obviously go into the non-digital technology space. We're going to explore some of the developments in big data. I know some of you may already being in audit. In fact, as accountants, we use Excel. So we are involved in a lot of data and analytics, but now there's this we'll call it monster of big data and analytics. So we need to understand where we stand as a profession. We'll touch on that. I'm going to look at the current talk of the town, at least artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI, which I'm sure a lot of you will have interacted with. So just to understand what is happening in that space, what's currently there, probably where it comes from, but most importantly, where it's going in the future and how it's going to affect us as a profession, but also societies and workers in general. We're going to touch on cloud computing. We're going to look at extended reality just to extend our imagination about what is happening or what is coming. And then we're going to look at now how we connect that to what you are trying to do, or rather maybe to the profession, but then also to the theory or the technical knowledge that you have or that you encounter on a daily, and specifically for the APC. I've shared some resources that I thought were important. I didn't share everything that I've looked at, and then I will touch briefly on some of the opportunities and where I think it is important for you to start thinking, especially going into the future, and then we'll have that Q&A right towards the end. Okay, so like I mentioned, I was involved in the CA 2025 program, academic working group for a while back, where really we were conceptualizing a lot of these things that are now happening currently. You will appreciate that SAICA's competency framework traditionally or historically focused on technical competence, which is your core modules, your financial reporting and auditing and all the other good stuff. But I think with the introduction or with the understanding and the realization that things are changing and things are going to change, SAICA then introduced or emphasized the importance to integrate professional values and attitudes as well as enabling competencies. So that's how this links up together. It's important that you understand that big picture as our starting point. although we will be focusing just on the one digital acumen for today, it's important that you understand that it integrates everywhere. And SAICA now wants you to look, or rather looks at competence in an integrated way. And that's why we have, for example, the APC. And so with the growth or the emergence of the digital economy and things changing fast, and if you know the history of where connectivity comes from, it started with the dot-com bubble, I think in the early 2000s, then it came up. There's lots of businesses that came up that didn't survive. There's the classic examples like your Netflix and Blockbuster and many other disruptive technology-driven or based technologies that came up or that are coming up or continue to come up. And therefore, SAICA then saw the need for us in the way that we do things and to shift towards catering for this economy. So it's also, you need to understand that technology is considered to be one of the biggest or the key drivers of value creation for organizations and business. And that's why we as SAICA members need to ensure that we are aligned to the expectations of business, and as people that are considered to create value, it does become important for you to align. But this is important because you need to start with the why. So a lot of things that you do, of course, with your APC and etc., are important, but you need to understand why it is that SAICA has then said this is an area of importance for us to consider, or for us to look at. I think also just to mention that the digital acumen does count a few things that you need to make sure that you know and understand, and we'll touch on some of the detail as we go along. Things like your big data and analytics, things like automation, new developments like AI, for example. Quantum computing is something that is worth watching, probably not going to come along in a commercial sense anytime soon, but it's worth knowing and understanding what is coming in the future. And with the rapid uncertainty and change that we are seeing, you never know when they might be saying 10, 20 years now, but it might actually just be 5 years. There's a breakthrough and suddenly it's available commercially. And maybe things like computational thinking. I think SAICA places a bit of emphasis on it. So, for example, you need to be able to solve something using tech, or someone, call it a programmer, get a programmer in, tell them exactly what you want to be solved. You don't have to do it yourself, or understand and appreciate that you don't have to do it yourself, but you can interact with a programmer or a coder, if you can't code, to then solve that problem for you. So essentially, the role profile of the CA is expected to change, and it's changing drastically. And the market needs change because things have changed. The expectations are different. Things in society, in the way society works, is different. And that's why we're now having to go beyond just the number crunching, and areas like digital tech have become so important for us as a profession. So maybe to encourage a bit of interaction at the starting point, if any one of you can just tell me what your thoughts on the impact of the developments that you've seen are or is in society, jobs, profession, business, or whatever that you may have seen so far, because that's what we're going to then be exploring after that. Anybody? And I know Rendani said you guys are an interactive bunch, so I'm expecting all hands to be up at this point. Anyone? Rendani, please help me. Is there a hand up? Okay, if there isn't, it's fine. I'm sure you're reserving your, okay, there's a hand up. Yes, please go ahead.
I think one of the impacts that digital technology has is that businesses have been brought into our homes through the use of smartphones. So we're able to actually do our business on our smartphones, to advertise. It's in our face, basically.
Yes, yes. And that affects both business, but also, would you not say that to an extent, the very fabric of society? Because like you said, you can transact with your business as you sit with your family in your lounge. There's also many other things that affect society, how business has managed to gain access to your personal lives. And if you think about the attention economy, for example, where we're literally drawn to our cell phone and devices, that we are unable to move ourselves away from that. So there's a lot of things that are changing with society, with jobs, the way we work. Right now, in my time, I'm gonna come. I don't know if this is the old hand, Rachel, but in my time, this class would have never happened. I would have needed to be in front of you, and we would have needed to be in a class. So the ways that we do things, there's a lot of job displacements that are happening already, but also expected. There's a need to reskill, rethink our profession. When I worked in enabling competencies, there's a lot of reskilling that is needed, but also there's a lot of new opportunities that are coming along for jobs, for businesses, and we'll touch on opportunities when we come to the end. So this is not even the beginning, probably, of some of the things that are out there. I think there's a lot that is happening, and there's a lot of changes in terms of what is happening. So I will delve into big data and analytics, but I think what is important, or what I would like you to take note of with this discussion, is how where we come from as a profession when it comes to data and analytics. So where we used to be, where we would process and work with very structured and financial data, to now where everything is all over the place. There's no structure, there's no columns. You can't use your spreadsheet as you know now. If you're in audit, if a client gives you data that is not in a spreadsheet, you freak out. You don't understand what is this. So you expect everything to be in order, to work in a certain way, because that's what we've been taught, or that's what we've historically worked in, to now a world where literally everything is everywhere. And someone, not you, but someone needs to then work on some kind of structure, some kind of cleanup and engineering of that data to get it to be ready. And it's non-financial. It doesn't make the kind of sense that you are used to. So now we need to, or someone needs to be able to work with that data. So there's that shift in terms of thinking that we need to have. Of course, there's the AI. We'll touch specifically on generative AI, which is what is currently the talk of the town. So there's a lot of things that are happening in that space as well. For example, there's expectation of rapid democratization. So it's going to become very widely available. If you look at ChatGPT, what happened in November 22 is that it became available to everybody. So the expectation is that, of course, these models are going to become integrated to most of the apps that we use. But really, while it was expensive to create ChatGPT, in the near future, it's going to be available to anyone. Everyone's going to be able to create it, or rather, it's going to become much more cheaper to create it. So there's a lot of things there. We'll touch on generative AI. There's things like adaptive AI. Responsible AI is a big question or concern currently. There's a need for people, and if you understand where our profession is coming from, we are considered to be ethical, responsible leaders. So if the concern with AI is responsible AI, it's a lot of governance issues, it's only right, or it's only an opportunity that we as a profession enter into that space with our knowledge and understanding and trust that the market has, and provide that and ensure that this AI space does not go loose, and that there are people who are there who are providing or making sure that developments are being made in a responsible manner. It's not explainable currently. So again, if you come from an audit perspective, it's not even possible to understand what the system has done. If you think about generative AI or ChatGPT right now, you can't even verify how it has created what it has created. So if I'm an auditor, how am I even going to provide assurance over what it creates? But again, it's an opportunity, because somebody at some point very soon is going to need to be able to do that. There's also things like NLP, computer vision. There's a lot of things that are coming up in this space that are important. But I think essentially what is happening is that there's increasing collaboration with humans, between AI and humans, that we are expecting to see. And you guys need to be at the forefront, and you need to be not only users, but you need to be part of the development as well. The cybersecurity risks that I'm sure you know about. One that I am going to touch on is quantum computing. I think I briefly touched on it again earlier, that it's not something that is expected to be commercially available, but the fact that there are already computers with quantum computing powers that are out there. I think some of the bigger tech companies have them. The massive capability of those computers, if they were to come into fruition or commercialized in any way, you need to understand what the changes could be. For example, in 2019, Google said or announced that the computer that they created could solve what it would take our normal, good, well-powered computers today 10,000 years to solve. Now, if a computer like that were to be created and it's available, can you imagine some of the security risks, for example, or cyber? In fact, no country, you can't even begin to protect anything. So all of this, the systems of internal controls that you know today, everything that you've come to know, if I could create that, I could really pose a serious threat. In fact, no country, they say, no country would be safe if I had that kind of computing power. You need to understand and be aware that then everything basically that you know becomes null and void. Okay, so again, these are some of the technologies that are there. It would take us a bit of time to go through each one of them, but I will go through a few, like I mentioned, and then just see. Some of them will cover when we talking about the impact on some of the work that we actually do. Okay. One interesting thing that I think we need to be mindful of is the impact on jobs. So there's a report that is released periodically by the World Economic Forum that I like to read on. I've provided, I think, a link to it. This is the top half. So if you look at the row on the right, this is about the halfway. I'll show you the bottom half just now. But if you look at where new jobs are being created, you start to see that the tech world is where jobs are created to a very, very large extent. So your AI machine. Okay. Sorry, I think I got muted. So if you have a look to see where the jobs are being created, you'll see that tech is probably the leading force in terms of job creation, and that obviously has an impact on a lot of the other work that is not aligned or is utilizing tech. So that's why you've got at on the left hand side, that's your top half of the jobs. But if you look at your bottom half of the jobs, you'll begin to see there's your accountants and auditors right there. So we are actually expected between 2023 and 2027 to have a net decrease in terms of jobs. If you compare that to number one, which is basically AI and machine learning specialists, that are expected to have a significant net increase or creation of jobs. But you can also just begin to see this trend. And this trend has been coming along for the past, I think, a decade or so. So the expectation is that over time, you will see less and less of jobs like record keeping or bookkeeping and accounting and the physical entry of but let's look, if you look at the very last one, for example, bank tellers. When last did you actually physically go to deposit money at the bank? So you can see that these things, of course, they develop over time. It's research-based, but it begins to paint a picture of where we're going. And as a profession as well, we're expected rather to have a net decrease. I think being in the South African context and in Africa specifically, where development, especially from a technology perspective, is not where it probably should be. There remains a lot of opportunity, and I think a lot of companies continue to want, international companies continue to want to invest in the African continent with opportunities. But it gets one worried where exactly, or if we are going to be able to realize the potential jobs that are out there, and if we are reskilling fast enough to get people and young people and potential employees to be ready for this net create on these jobs, these new jobs that are coming up or that are going to be created. Especially if you start to connect it with things like the education system, this then becomes is a real serious concern. There are lots of other things that we need to consider from the South African context in terms of where exactly are we going currently. Are we emphasizing, have we created sufficient infrastructure to be able to realize some of these jobs, or for people to be able to, if we think about our electricity challenges, for example. So you begin to see that, look, we have a seriously long way to go for us to catch on. And as the country struggles with unemployment rates currently, that if we're not creating an environment where people are going to be ready to take up these jobs that are being created or the new jobs that are coming up, then we're likely going to sit with a problem. Okay, so another thing, maybe just before I move on from the jobs discussion. So if you look at the psycho competency framework, there's some good research that was done by McKinsey on what they called distinct elements of talent. So in this research, they basically were saying what skills or what competence or what talents are going to be needed for the future. And I did a very comprehensive analysis of those skills, or rather of that framework that McKinsey created, and compared it to Psychos framework. And I think it matches almost 100% in terms of what the skills of the future are going to be. So you can be assured that what Psycho is trying to do is really what is needed for your future, but also for the future of the profession, as well as business that we serve. One interesting insight that I would like to share from the McKinsey research is that they said for employment, so for you to be employed or for employability, according to research, the number one skill or the number one ranked skill, or let's call it competence, is adaptability. So your ability to adapt is what is going to make you employable going into the future. So it's not your knowledge of IFRS. It is not your ability to audit the most complex transaction. It is not, it is your ability to adapt to changing environments. That was number one. They ranked coping with uncertainty as number two. And I can tell you that with the digital technology space, nobody knows what is happening. Nobody knows where we are. Nobody knows where we're going. And as responsible advisors, trust people that will trust you to then be able to give some kind of advice for them to navigate. So that's the second most important skill, your ability to cope with uncertainty. And the third one was actually communication skills, your ability to synthesize messages, take all of this information wherever it's coming from, package it nicely for people. So those are the three top skills or competency areas that you need to focus on if you want to be employed in the future: adaptability, coping with uncertainty, as well as synthesize messages. So if we start to look at the big data or the business of big data, so one thing I wish I could say, but you probably shouldn't, you need to not look at, almost don't look at it like an accountant, because the danger of this is that we have, like I mentioned earlier, traditionally looked at data in a financial sense. So it's financial information. There needs to be a debit and a credit so that I can take it and put it on this side and take this one and put it on that side. And I can quickly explain what has happened, and then Bob's your uncle. But when you look into the world of big data and what is happening or what has happened over time, in fact, what we continue to do over time with our many devices, for example, data is being created in various ways, in various shapes, forms, and sizes. It's available everywhere, a lot of it on the internet, and that's what has led to the creation of generative AI. But it's really just everywhere. What IFAC did, I think a year or two ago, is they published some very good content to say, look, as a profession, this is something that we need to start thinking about. We understand data. We've always worked with data, so we know it. We have that history. We know where it comes from. We know how to protect it. We know how to control it. We know how to use it. We know how to analyze it even. And we can communicate with our stakeholders. But when we look into the world of big data, now we need to be able to adapt what we know for the new world of work and the new world of business, which is largely driven by big amounts of data that business can't even begin to use. If you look at the growth of data over the past decade, it's insane, and it's projected that it will continue to grow. Of concern, nobody's using this data, but what we do know is that there's a lot of value in that data. And that's where we as a profession need to be able to support business in creating this value. Of course, you'll have to work with different people like your scientists to an extent who may be able to navigate some of the data with greater ease. Because of course, we may not have the capability and the statistical knowledge to navigate some of this ground, but some, of course, we may. If you are able to collect the data, clean it up nicely, and then create some analysis or use a tool to analyze it, then it's fine. But there may be a need for you to work with other people. So what we understand, there's a lot of value in data. Some of it is actually worth lots and lots of money. Some of it is sitting in the statements of financial position, because there is in fact money that the company is going to be generating in the future. Some of it is sitting somewhere in the cloud and no one has even began to think about touching it. Some, it's just sitting there, nothing's being done. There's probably an asset there, but because no one knows what to do with it, no one is advising anyone to do it. Maybe they just started, okay, let's start with a smaller project. Okay, the expectation is that as a profession, we've got a role to play in all of this. This is the data management value chain. So how IFAC broke it down is they said, well, there's 4 parts to it. There's data gathering, engineering, where we're collecting the data. There's a huge, there's a role that we can play in that space of the collection of the data to make it, or to bring it into the business for it to begin to be used. There's a lot of internal controls that need to go in there. Of course, you cover controls, you understand internal controls. There's assurance that we can provide. We can make assessments to say, is this fit for purpose? Because we have a good domain understanding. We understand reporting. We understand accountancy. We understand business. We have a very good understanding of business. But the people that are currently playing along with this data are data scientists. All they know is numbers and statistics. They don't even understand what the business is trying to really understand. I've worked in 2 data projects that involve data scientists. Sometimes you underestimate the knowledge that you actually have and the ability that you have to direct and support what they need to do, because they really don't understand business in the way that you do. So as they program whatever they need to, as they apply their models and different techniques, you need to be there guiding them as part of the project, working together with them to then create value for the business. So I said there's data gathering. There's a lot of work that we can do there. There's also controllership. So as financial controllers, if you think about it, as accountants or finance managers, we don't really own the money. We just control it. We account for it. So here as well, with the data that is sitting somewhere in the businesses or on the cloud, wherever it could be sitting, we could provide the service where we provide controllership, just like how we provide controllership for finances. And for example, for assets, we don't own the PPE in a business. I'm talking about in a business setting. We don't own the PPE, but we provide controllership over the PPE. It's owned by the different divisions or business units or whatever. You created a fixed asset register that then you can quickly go and verify to where the asset is physically sitting, but you don't necessarily, it's not necessarily sitting in your finance division, those assets. There's also then the insights. That's where the value is created. So like I said, you can either create those analyses yourself if it's something that you can do yourself. But a lot of times, and where the focus now needs to shift to, is analyzing this big data, where you're most likely going to need data scientists to assist you to navigate all this this massive data that is sitting somewhere and to which there's no structure. Of course, the first part is about creating structure, creating controls, making sure that it makes sense, and actually mining that data. I think mining probably of data is one of the biggest areas of shortage of skills. And I think this is globally. So if you really want to secure the future in terms of jobs, that's where you could probably be investing in terms of skills development. The third part, again, is analysis, really providing insights for business or for whoever you are supporting. And then the last part is our ability to advise and communicate. So that's where IFEX sees the profession playing the roles, or how the profession playing the different roles in the data management value chain. There's a lot of opportunities that will come up using, of course, what we know, business, but also accountancy. If you look there, I've provided information to say, in addition to just the normal data management value chain, there's also then the machine learning and AI models that come in. We need to be able to support and critique and assess these models to say, are they ready? So while right now, I'm sure a lot of us are using ChatGPT, or rather interact with ChatGPT as users, in the near future, you are going to be expected to actually make comments and provide advice and be part of projects that create things like ChatGPT or integrate things like ChatGPT into company systems. Okay, that's pretty much what it is coming up or is happening in terms of big data. The talk of the town currently, of course, is ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is really just a form of generative AI. And generative AI comes from big data, and so it's important that you understand there's a lot that can be derived or will continue to be derived from the big data that is sitting out there idling and not doing anything. And we as a profession, as accountants, need to account for that, but also we need to provide advice to business that we serve. So like I said, ChatGPT, which is what we use, there's many others. There's many other large language models. A lot of them are still under development. If you use ChatGPT, you can also look at Google Bard, also under development, but it can already create some things for you. So from this data, then they create these large language models that learn from the data. What the breakthrough has been is that generative AI is able to create new content. So what we've had in the past is that AI could analyze data, look at data, make predictions, and give you insights in terms of analysis. This is what we are seeing here, etc. Now it can actually create something completely, well, arguably completely new, like an image, like a video, like text, like code, audio. Those are the key examples of some of things that it can create. And with time and with better information or data that is being fed into it, it's going to become better and better and better. And I think by the year 2030, the expectation is that it will have surpassed a lot of the knowledge workers. So people like us who create knowledge, it will have learned so much, and it will be able to create good things such that it can compete with most of the knowledge workers. Of course, we don't really know which direction it's going to go, but that's the current expectation. One other thing that I think is important to understand is this stuff, machine learning and deep learning, in fact, the development that you are seeing is because of breakthroughs in machine learning, but particularly from deep learning. Machine learning started 50 years ago, in fact, probably 70 years ago in the 1950s. That's when it started, but the breakthrough is happening now. And what they're saying, what the expectation is that in the coming years, it's going to be far more quicker than what we've had from the 1950s up until now. I think maybe let me go to the next slide, which will touch more specifically on the impact on business and the economy. But maybe let me start with deep learning, which is where really the breakthrough has happened. And it's exciting to understand how or why this happened. So historically, there's been a lot of activity around machine learning, but what's happened recently is that they created something that almost simulates a human brain, and it's deep learning. So it's like a technique that or method that they use in AI to simulate how our brain works. And we work for, or your brain, the way that the human brain works is through examples. So you look at things and you almost program them, or you classify them based on that. So what this system has, or this method now has, is it has deep, almost hidden neural networks, and there needs to be at least 3 or more layers where the model then takes the information that you put in, breaks it back and forth through these deep layers, and then it is able to create a much more accurate output. So that's where machine learning was, it was still good, but it was not as accurate. With deep learning, the accuracy has almost been perfected, and again, it's still going to get better and better. So with generative AI, as you know, you input something, whatever prompt that you want it to do for you, and then it goes through this process that incorporates deep learning, goes through the neural networks, and then it is able to create completely new, or again, in inverted commas, new content. So one thing that you need to understand with generative AI, or some important things to note, right now we are excited to see ChatGPT and that it can do stuff for you, etc., etc. And I think we must talk about, there's a lot of implications in that regard. We are currently working at SACA on a project on ChatGPT and the ethics, as well as the legislation around that. So there's certain things, for example, if you create something or if you write something through ChatGPT, who owns it? Do you need to, should you credit it? And if you don't, what are the ethical implications? Yesterday we had a meeting where we went through, and I think there's a slide that talks to that. We had a meeting where we were literally going through the CPC and the fundamental principles with the guys that work with the CPC at SACA to say, okay, so what is the implications, or what are the implications when you look at integrity when you're using ChatGPT? What are the implications for professional competence and due care, professional behavior? And we found that all of these fundamental principles are threatened, not only by generative AI, but generally by all of the tech, right? So one thing, though, that we do need to understand is that it's expected to overhaul and change a lot of things when it comes to productivity and the global economy. It's expected that there's trillions and trillions of dollars that are going to be added onto global economies. And you can understand that as a profession of accountants or accountancy professionals, there's a really huge expectation in terms of our understanding of what it is, what it does, and what it will be doing in the future. I think it's also important to understand that the nature of generative AI is that it cuts across all of the industries, all of the sectors. Of course, maybe some sectors more than others, but it will cut across, it will cut right across, from finance, from banking to manufacturing to healthcare, quite a bit in healthcare, to government, to every single sector will be affected. The expectation, according to research that I read, expectation is around 60% in terms of automation that can happen as a result of generative AI. Because you need to understand that it's not just going to end with writing the note that you want, or just quickly giving you an idea. It is going to develop, and it is going to end up doing a lot more things. So the expectation is that given the current jobs that we have, up to about 60% or even more in terms of jobs that are going to be or could be automated. But there's also important research that I read that it's not necessarily able to automate jobs. It automates tasks, right? So it can't automate everything that you do as an employee, but it will be able to automate a lot of the tasks that we have to complete. It's going to change how businesses operate or interact with us. I think earlier we had a comment regarding how tech or companies are able to enter our living spaces. If you've interacted with a chatbot or on WhatsApp or online, you will have noticed how some of the times you can get help or not, or sometimes they'll refer you to an agent, which is not very exciting. I don't know about you, but with this kind of technology, it will be able to do everything for you up until maybe placing your order, payment, or facilitate whatever that you need to do. So the expectation is that from a chatbot, customer support, it's going to improve that area quite a bit. Also, remember, it can go into your systems internally if you do auditing, even if it's theory, in theory, if you're not doing it in practice, but you understand those business processes. In fact, even if you don't do auditing, there's business processes that we then go through, we do. So this AI will be able to go and learn what is happening within your business, and it can perfect or do better, and it can actually interact with a customer or with an employee or with whoever that it needs to. So you just feed it the data and then it learns from there. And so when you are developing your systems, which is where my question or my point was coming back to, when you are looking at your systems and how, or your business processes and your systems of internal control, then you need to understand that you could actually have all of the things that you have come to learn in your modules that covered business processes and systems of internal control being done by a robot that goes in and learns first. So you need to be able to create or support and provide advice to people who are going to create this robot, teach it, support it in its learning, and then it needs to authorize the order or take the order from this person to that person and create those multiple copies that you need to be created to go there and to go there. And even there, it might even record for you. So all of these things, that's the direction. So while it's all good and fun for now for us to use it, we need to, as a profession, understand where it's likely going to go. Before I move on to the next slide, I don't know if you follow the developments around generative AI, but there was that interesting, call it war between Google and OpenAI, ChatGPT, which is backed by Microsoft. So if you know that market, Google, if you search, literally Google search has almost 100% of the search market, and in the tech space, search is the biggest generator of money. So if you want to make money in tech, it's in search. So that's where the money has always been. So the market has always been dominated by Google, I think, since we were young, probably 20 or more years now. But recently, and this informed probably what OpenAI tried to do. And again, OpenAI has the backing of Microsoft. So they released this, I think, in 2020, 2022 November, and they released it for free. Right. So of course, there would have been people who would have needed to provide advice on this. Is it right to offer it for free? Should it be a paid service, et cetera, et cetera? But they're trying to compete with Google. And of course, Google search is well known, is well established. But if these guys were going to make some kind of dent in terms of competition, they then needed to come up with some strategies. So there's been interesting developments over the past 4 months in terms of the war between Google and, let's call it, Microsoft Bing, which then uses ChatGPT. So at first, it seemed like Microsoft is going to make a bit of a dent in the search market. Again, this is where most of the money is in tech. But I then Google came back. There was a bit of a boo-boo that Google made, I think around March. Then they came back again at either April or May, and then they launched, or not launched. Then there was that soft launch of showcasing what their Bard app can now do, to say we're even better than ChatGPT, because the ChatGPT that we have is a model before, and I think in the past 4 months they since released ChatGPT-4 to showcase something better, and I think that's now the paid version. But with Google now, they were coming from behind, and they needed to prove, or they still need to prove, that in fact they have the upper hand in this war. It's an interesting development. It's going to change obviously how things work. But remember, we search almost everything. In fact, for your APC, you'll probably be searching. So what these tools are, in fact, what Google Bard will be able to do or is going to do is that it connects to the internet, it connects to all the data that is out there, then it gives you an actual response based on what is on the internet and as well as what the data that it's learned from. Again, why is it important? Because these systems are going to be integrated with the systems that businesses used through application programming interfaces. So you know when you see those auditing, I think it comes usually at auditing when there's those interfaces that happen between two systems. So there's going, of course, there needs to be control because you're now relying on something, another system, or rather another system or another process. So these tools that are being developed by all these big tech companies, and again, it's expected that there's going to be more and more of them. We are going to be able to integrate them with our companies, business systems that we used to. Okay, so another interesting area. So we've always spoken. Again, if at any time you'd like to stop me and just to have a chat, please go on ahead. But if there's nothing, I'll just continue. So one other area that we've always had, I think, in auditing systems of internal control, a discussion regarding company X is using the cloud company provider wherever that they may be. I think initially it started being in Dubai, but what we've seen in recent time is that there's a lot of migration, actual migration into the cloud, and there's a reason for that. So cloud is not only used for storage. Of course, one of the key reasons why it's used is for storage of data. What we're seeing is that, of course, the companies are currently skeptical about using the cloud completely. So migration is currently happening on a hybrid format. We've seen a lot of growth in terms of data centers in South Africa specifically. AWS has, I think, somewhat probably landed in Cape Town with their new headquarters. I'm not sure where that is now, but what we're seeing is that there's definitely space for data centers in South Africa. There's growth in there. It enables what cloud computing enables us to do is really, and if you think about, don't start to think about quantum computing, but it really does make things faster. So the company is able to process transactions faster. Then the customer ends up having a seamless experience. So you can just quickly place an order and it's quickly delivered, or rather processed, to the picking center, and then the picking center quickly dispatches it, and then it's seamless, and therefore it is able to drive growth of sales and revenue. So the processing and how the systems of the company work are improved by migration to the cloud. Again, there's still a lot of skepticism around complete migration. Also, what has been happening with a lot of companies, that there's a lot of issues. And so if you start to think about those system development controls, there's a lot of issues with migrating to the cloud. There's a lot of risks and concerns with the migration. It's not an easy process. There's a lot of big companies that sit with old, outdated systems out there that need to actually be changed or migrated to a cloud kind of setup. So those are the kinds of things that we need to be able to get into and provide support. Again, a lot of the times you will be expected to use your normal basic principles of controls. However, the environment is different. And so you need to be able to apply them to an environment that incorporates cloud-based computing. It is very important for big data and analytics, because we would not be able to create data centers in-house that are able to keep all this data that we're not even using really, because again, we never know when we are going to need it. Another thing that is important is that we have then that real-time access to the data. But the nice thing as well that comes up from cloud computing is that we get to, there's the as a service platforms, infrastructure, software that we are able to use that is based on the cloud or is available over the internet, basically, that we have access to on a subscription basis. It is very cost effective for the business, unlike having to develop something or even to buy something over the shelf. We've seen that the change or the trend is that these things are rather being offered as a service, and they are based on a cloud. There's a big cloud provider. Then there's a company that will then use that space in the cloud. Then they offer us the software, and then we just use that as a service. There's a lot of concerns though with the cloud computing, but generally with connectivity, there's lots of attacks. If you do use Microsoft Outlook, there was an attack, I think last month sometime, where there was, for example, things were going to junk, etc. So you can see that there are risks. So risks continue to be there that need to be mitigated. There's also another provider that provides mostly just smaller cloud services that went completely offline after there was an attack. So there are attacks there, and there is still a need for control. So with this slide, I wanted us to, yes.
Hi, this is
Yes.
Teoho. Sorry
Sure.
to interrupt,
No,
but
go
before you
ahead.
before you continue, I think on just the previous slides as well, I wanted to ask this question, and maybe just as a foundation, we understand what technology is, and as a evolving species, we evolve and try to adapt to our environment and create a better environment. But then I'm coming to a question where you mentioned that with how generative AI and all of these things, they're working more on a task basis. They're not necessarily replacing an entire human or the job or process as it is. So my question is, and maybe for also Rendani to answer as a business owner, is that why do we want to accelerate technology so much? Is it because we want to solve more problems? Do we want to scale our businesses? Or do we just want to solve every possible problem as fast as we can? Because I'm having trouble to just reconcile the pace at how AI technology is coming and is becoming in our world.
Yeah. No, I think you, in fact, you have answered the question. There's a slide where I was going to talk about, and we can skip that one. What is happening is that business is trying to get to the money faster, quicker, and the competition is just not stopping. So it's almost like the train has long left the starting point, and everybody is trying to catch it, and therefore it becomes difficult. So for example, if you're not going to use it, someone else will, or someone else is. That's where the issue is that business is trying to get to its objectives, and one of them is to make money. So the more that they, in fact, you almost can't ignore it, or it's difficult to ignore, because if you are ignoring it, someone else is doing it, and therefore you're gonna get left behind. That's really where the crux of it is.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, right. Any other question? Okay, if there's no other question, I think let's jump on to this part, which is where you are going to continue to see it cropping up in your studies. Because this is where, as a profession, we are going to. I mentioned, for example, that we've created some kind of a task team at SAICA that's looking at generative AI. And we've put together a lot of different people from risk, compliance, etc., to try and understand and unpack what is happening. But really, what we're saying is that businesses expect us to provide this advice. They expect to be or rather, business needs to make these decisions and create value, and you are going to be relied on to provide that advice, which is why we need to then have a solid foundational understanding of where business is coming from and going to, so that we can then provide the advice that they need. And I think, just coming on to what you said now, there's a lot of issues with this. So if you do follow some of the tech news, the CEOs of Facebook and OpenAI have had to go and explain themselves to Congress in the US, because they are trying to hold them accountable. If you think about AI, for example, there's currently no legislation that says that governs basically the development of AI. If you remember a couple of years ago, there's that new law that came, I think it was the protection of data that came from the EU. And then I think years later, I think probably in 2021, then South Africa also then developed a law. So right now, there's the AI Act that is coming up in the EU that is still currently, I think it was voted on last month and still not approved, but it was just recommended. And therefore, we are expecting that that's going to pass, and that's going to be then the first law that we have that governs the development and the workings of AI. There's lots of other concerns in the space because there's just no one knows what exactly is happening. No one knows if they're doing the right thing or not. And some of these systems that are being developed are so powerful and so dangerous and harmful to society, to customers and to people, that there's really just little or limited control over these. Is there any other question? Is there a question? Any other question?
Maybe just a comment. I think also for me, it's like technology is an enabler. I think there's still primary industries or primary services that still remain. Like transport still remains from, delivering a person from A to B. Technology is enabling on how that service or that thing happens. But also it's just like some problems are still at primary and they still basic. Technology, you just use it to enable and to foster the way to get to the money, I guess.
No, you are 100% correct. But what's interesting, you made an example of transportation. So with generative AI, for example, the expectation is that there's going to be self-driving cars. So again, technology is definitely an enabler, but without proper guidance and understanding and governance, it can really go whichever direction. Do you get my point? Do you get my point?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so that's why we're encouraging you to be a part of the solution, to understand the systems, and to rather than being consumers and users, which is important, like you said, we understand technology, but remember the expectation is that you not only understand it as a user, but also you provide support to business that develops and implements these systems as well. So that's where we're trying to encourage. And is there another question or comment? Is there anything else? Any other question or comment?
Hi, sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to understand the part when you said when we're looking at AI, there are also ethical concerns that are there. So I'm just struggling to understand how I can link issues relating to ethics with AI, because if we're to say, okay, it's just a tool that aids us to meet our objectives as a business, then it should be good enough. Now, the part of ethics now, I'm struggling to really link it to the advancement of technology.
Okay, so maybe let me start with this when it comes to ethics and AI and technology in general. So remember, these systems or models are trained based on data. A lot of this data is not necessarily reliable or verified data, but of even more concern or greater concern, if you look at point 2, these systems can and actually are biased. They can be absolutely incorrect, and incorrect could be an understatement. They could discriminate. They could be used incorrectly. You don't know who programmed it. And so if you, sorry, I wanted to get to the ethics slide. So if you start to think about, for example, maybe let's look at confidentiality, right? When you look at ChatGPT, if you've used it, you are supposed to input information and then it processes it and then it kicks out an output. You need to be careful not to share information that may be confidential. So you can't because you can give it an income statement, it will analyze it for you. That's ChatGPT, the ChatGPT-3 that everybody has access to. So as a professional, you can't input information that is confidential on there because you don't know what then happens to it. But also, you mentioned a very important point that you think, or rather the assumption is that everything becomes fine. It's not. So if you think about objectivity, there's a risk that we are not objective when we're looking at these systems because we tend to trust things that are processed by the systems or by things like AI. And therefore you lose your objectivity, and then you just take whatever that it gives out to you. Another thing, you need to think about your integrity. So if you have not created that work that you kicked out, or you has been created by the AI, now who created it? And are you giving it credit for the work that it has done? And if I can make an example with that specific question in terms of intellectual property, there's nowhere, or not, rather, there's nothing currently that is available to guide anybody to say where the intellectual property belongs. So, for example, the current case law tends to say, and this is both South Africa and internationally, tends to say ChatGPT or these models are not human, so they can't own any intellectual property. But or rather, a human can. But as a human, then what do I do? Do I own it and then credit ChatGPT? But then there's no space for me to credit if I go to, for example, to the CIPC to say, I've created something using ChatGPT. ChatGPT is going to, or rather, CIPC is going to say, this is mine. So are you being straightforward and honest in your dealings? And what is then the answer or the right way to go about it? The biggest threat probably comes, and when we looked at the CPC, it probably comes out of professional competence and due care, where SAICA members may not be able to work with these systems, may not be able to provide the advice that is expected of them with these systems when business calls for it. So that's how then the ethics are impacted by the developments in tech. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Maybe just to add, okay, I think maybe we used more of something that's available to everyone. But I've noticed that maybe for audit firms, they've been developing quite a number of systems. Maybe I'm just mixing up stuff. But if you look at maybe the tools that they use to audit, we have tools that assist in data analytics, advanced capabilities, and etc. So if we have AI assisting in such a way, then would we say in terms of integrity of the information would be affected because we have developed a tool and now we have AI to assist us maybe to analyze data better or get results faster. So would we say in our own capacity we are not being objective or
so
we're not being ethical?
Okay, so you are mixing things that are you in a good way, if I can call it that, because the sorry.
Sorry, go on. You can go on.
Okay, so the auditor needs to perform certain procedures, to audit or verify some of the information that has been created. And a lot of times, the companies or the clients that they are auditing are also using these technologies, and the auditor then needs to respond by making sure that they have the right tech and they are able to navigate. But when it comes to data and analytics specifically, then that is in fact the new standards or the updated auditing standards also guide the auditor to say that they need to be able to respond. And you'll see, I think I shared something, the IFAC has a data and technology matrix for all the resources that they're creating for audit firms. I think it's the fifth one that they are creating for audit firms to help them in terms of auditing. So there's nothing wrong with an audit firm creating or curating their own data and analytics software that is taught over time, perfected over time, to then to be able to navigate in a secured environment through client systems, analyze that data and kick out the information. So that is perfectly fine. I think it's been done for a while. But also, even if you think about historically before the systems were being created, that's how audits were done, is that you would look at it as an auditor, you would ask yourself, does it make sense? You'd analyze it going up, is going down. What is this group? What is that group? If I look at the weather, for example, that the timing of the increases or the spikes and the decreases, does that make sense? So that's fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. There's still the threats still exist, because what happens or who takes responsibility should the model get it incorrectly. But you'll find that at firm level that there's processes that are put in place to make sure that this is adequately mitigated. But at the end of the day, you need to audit. That's what the objective is, and how you get to the final outcome is then up to you as the auditor. But there's nothing wrong with using data and analytics tools to help you. The only thing that again I'm going to touch on is to say, remember that there's while audit firms are doing this, which is good, it's progressive, because businesses also exposed to much more data. The big data analytics that I was referring to here is not the same as that structured financial data that we usually are working with. This is now all the data that is sitting out there that we are not doing anything with to a large extent.
Okay, thank you so much.
Is there any question? Any other question?
Nothing from my end.
Just
Yeah.
I guess I can stand corrected. Like, for another example about ethics is when, like, some websites you have like a bot that you would type in and it answers. And then I think it was on Twitter where there was a bot that was trying to be a teenager, and then but when it started gathering the way the teenagers were speaking, it ended up learning to be racist, vulgar, and all that. So maybe there's also that the ethical dilemma in that one is that it's learning, but what is it, the output of that learning? So yeah, in terms of the bots, that link also can come into place.
Absolutely, because that what it is learning is what is going to drive the output that we are going to get ultimately. And if the quality goes back to that data engineering and mining that I was talking about, if the quality of the input of, if there's no quality in the input of the data that it's used to teach it, then obviously the output is going to be problematic. And I think another issue is that currently, I mean, you can go, you are on Twitter. If you go on Twitter or you go into the internet, some of the things that are out there are a bit scary. So if this is the data that we are using to train these systems, then you can imagine what it's going to kick out. But absolutely correct. That's part of it, ethical, and maybe even a broader governance concern that we all need to worry about. question. And any other question? Is there any other question?
Mr. Mrs.
Yes.
It's just a comment.
Right.
What I've noticed lately with Microsoft, and also if you look at Microsoft and look at Google, the products. Now if I'm gonna zoom in on Microsoft, which I use mostly, we have
Yes.
there Power Automate, and then we also have Power Apps. Those products, they are there for you to actually create certain automations. But
Yes.
back then, those in order for you to create automations, you actually have the ability to actually code. So, and my observation now is that these big tech companies, they're actually creating a platform for us accountants and also any other person who's not in the technology space to actually be able to create a flow without actually doing the coding.
Absolutely. And yes,
And
you are 100% spot on. And there's a lot of these platforms that are cropping up. So I don't know if you're done.
yes, yeah. And also now, us as an accountant, we don't actually have to actually worry about how to code, but
Yeah.
how to actually identify technology products that will help us to actually do our job better. And yeah, and then the last comment, which is something that I saw, it was saying that technology is not going to replace jobs, but people who are able to use technology are going to replace people's jobs.
Yes. 100% spot on. So both of those are correct. I agree that I think when probably a couple of years ago, the thinking was that everybody needs to code. But over the past couple of years, we've seen the emergence of no code or low code kinds of platforms. And so the expectation now has changed to, rather than being able to code, computational thinking to see, can you solve problems using, there will still probably be a need for people who can program. I don't expect that it will be eliminated 100%, but there's definitely a rise in these no code, low code kinds of platforms. But I think generally also it is important still to be able to work with programmers and coders so that you guide them and tell them exactly what is needed should you be in an environment. And again, it's not a matter of understanding code and being able to code, but just to be able to guide them when they explain some of these things to you, that you can converse with them and advise them based on your knowledge. Certainly, and again, 100% correct. The trend or the expectation is that people are not going to lose jobs, but people who don't use the tech will lose jobs. Again, as a profession, the expectation is that we'll be able to go beyond that. We're not just users. If you look at SACA's competency framework, there are about 7 or 8 areas in terms of digital acumen. User competence is just one of them. There's all these other ones that are part of the competency framework. But absolutely correct. Any other comments?
Hello.
Yes.
So I'm gonna add on to the last speaker's comments with regards to how technology is impacting our workplaces. There has been in the past couple of years in our workspaces the need to digitize, and that has gone as far as being included as part of our key performance indicators in the workplace. Especially in the finance space. So I agree very much with the speaker when they say that if you do not innovate or digitize, you're probably going to be left behind. So a lot of companies have been taking it up on themselves to join the wave, right? Of technological advancement. Using the easiest one is the Microsoft 365 suite, right? But you
Yes.
can also add on there your Python, your SQL, your Azure, Microsoft Azure. You can add all of these other technology engines and database warehouse that you use in order to be an all-round accountant. So for me, for example, we are forced now, you know, as part of the compliance training and all of that. It's added into our quarterly, monthly reviews that we need to learn something digital. And then at the end of the year, that becomes part of the thing that you need to present as a goal that you have actually achieved. And you have to have used that in your processes. So we were actually, I don't want to say forced, but we were pushed to learn how to we were pushed to learn how to use data analytics in our daily processes. For example, I had to automate a process that that I used to run in one of my in my space. So it's adapt or die, right?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So that's just basically what I've observed. But also my biggest concern though is I don't know if this is a conspiracy or not, but I think the biggest thing about artificial intelligence is the fact that it can learn on its own is an issue, right? So the problem is, okay, so maybe because I used to have an issue with the fact that, okay, but at the beginning somebody feeds the information to it, right? But it has the ability to now go and find the information by itself, right? So I think the biggest concern then becomes, no matter how much you try to control it, there might be a point where you get to a point where you actually can't control it because there is so much vast information out there. It uses different types of methodologies and search capabilities for it to find that information. And then it makes, I don't know if this is true, but it makes its own decisions, right? So I think that probably is the issue. Like, where do you draw the line when it comes to governance? How do you actually govern something that can actually, learn by itself? So I don't know. We'll wait and see.
It is definitely a wait and see. And right now, like you say, there's very little that anyone can or is doing with regards to governance. But again, this makes it the biggest issue in the sector that there's nobody, or there's such weak governance structures or systems. The AI Act that they're working on in Europe is, like I said, the first of its kind. It's a risk-based act. So it assesses, as you would know, it assesses the risk. What is the risk with your model that you have developed? And then it looks to ban some of the things where the governors or the legislators in Europe consider it to be harmful. So if ChatGPT, for example, I think the good example that they've used is emotions. They don't want emotional recognition. They don't want things like that have a social impact or more of a people impact. Or if it's got an impact on people, then it will be scored a high risk. Then there's certain things that you're going to have to comply with. So I think it's probably low, no risk. Then you can go on ahead. Then there is probably low. I can't remember the exact categories, but let's say low, medium, and high risk. So the different categories of risk will then have different responsibilities when you develop this model. So I'm 100% on board with your concern. It is I think we should be concerned, we should be worried, but we probably all need to stop and pause and ask ourselves, like what someone asked earlier, do we really need to be doing all of these things, and why are we even doing them? But what you want to find is once you are done with that pause, you're probably going to need to come back and continue with it because it's just so difficult to get it to stop, unless if you were to have a powerhouse like the EU, for example, banning or stopping some of the models. But unfortunately, what you are going to likely find is that if the EU bans something, and maybe let me not use China, let me just say, because America has also started, it made a call, I think, for comments to try and legislate the systems, but they are obviously far behind. We haven't even gotten off the mark. South Africa is still working on a law to change the existing laws, and it doesn't even consider developments on AI. So it's probably 5 or more years in the making, but we are trying to advocate for South Africa to also create some kind of law for AI. But my point is that currently we're hoping that the law that is coming up in the EU will make a dent to try and kind of ease up on what people can do, because like you said, if you're going to create a system that can learn for itself, anything is possible. It can do anything. So hopefully with a powerhouse like that, some of the risks can be mitigated. We'll of course wait and see how what America does, but generally South Africa tends to follow the EU and not necessarily the America. Is there another comment? Any other comment
What
or
about,
question? Mm-hmm.
okay, so what about the positive aspects of some of these developments? For instance, like blockchain, right? I know some people sort of, when we think about blockchain, mostly we think about things like crypto or digital currency. But blockchain is way more than that, because
Yes.
blockchain can solve issues in a business that will alleviate or eliminate control or internal control problems. For example,
Yes.
It'll eliminate things like mostly actually control issues, financial control problems, loss of data. It cuts a lot of time between, it eliminates redundancies. And yes, maybe we might have a problem of jobs and people not necessarily being there, but in terms of saving the business a lot of time and money, blockchain is one of those developments that can help. So I don't know if blockchain is that much of as advanced as this newly found AI like ChatGPT, or I mean, because then most of the programming of blockchain is still done by a human being. I'm not sure. So why would it be considered a threat to governance in that aspect?
Okay, so I think it's not considered a threat to governance. It is considered a threat potentially to your and my job, because obviously it will create much more reliable and transparent systems of recording, or ledgers of recording, whatever that we want to create. So, and it's no one can, you can't create a better internal control system than a blockchain. That's probably one of the best protections you can give to your data. So in terms of security, so I don't think it's definitely, and my thought is all of these technologies all offer some kind of advantage to somebody at least. So blockchain is a good one. It's a great example. But in fact, I think there was a project that was done by the banking sector. I can't remember. I think they called it something like Coca or something, where they were demonstrating precisely what you're saying, that you can you can make a payment to someone quicker, faster, reliable, etc., etc.
Yes.
Again,
yes.
the downside is the jobs that we need to think about, and it is a serious consideration. If you think in South African context, there's certain things you can't do, and you will need to consider those jobs. But another thing that, although it was not related to finance, finance as such, there's research that we did as SAICA, I think, last year, but it was on because blockchain a lot of the times is being used for procurement, among other things. Of course, there's cryptocurrency that you mentioned. That's not what we're talking about. But there's a potential, rather, in the South African case study to use blockchain to improve public sector procurement. But when you look at that landscape, it really is, and I think there was a comment earlier, it's an enabler. It's not necessarily going to change anything. So it's just going to, like what we have now, put things out there. I'm talking from a procurement perspective. It's going to make sure that things are out there, but there's still accountability issues, other governance issues and players, and collusion that can happen between two people, for example, that you need to consider if you're going to invest so much into bringing such a solution. So I don't think it is probably as advanced as what we've seen with generative AI, which is what we spoke about mostly. But it definitely is a potential, and you can expect a breakthrough sometime soon, and then we'll see how it manifests. But I agree, it offers a lot of advantages, but all these technologies do offer advantages to at least to some people.
Thank you.
Does that answer you? Okay. Is there another comment? Any other question? Maybe any other experiences that you guys want to share? Because I know I can hear from the conversation that you are already interacting with a lot of these, and there has been a change in the environment to try and at least ready you for what is out there. Is there another comment? Okay, I don't know if you would like to end it. If there's no other comment, I know we have spent about an hour and a half together. Is there any other final comments?
Sisi,
Okay.
I have a question for you. As someone who is dealing directly with this, and there's a lot of research that goes into it, from your experience, what do you advise as people that are coming, like that are CAs wanting to become CAs? How do we equip ourselves with this knowledge and being able to apply it? And especially you speaking from experience and what you've seen.
Okay, so there's a few things that I can say. I think, okay, obviously, once you finish and you qualify, I think what SAICA has acknowledged is that we can't expect you to become an expert in all of these things. So what you are likely going to need to do is identify the area or areas that you would want to specialize in. So that would be my advice is, for example, if you are not going into ESG, which is where the next big wave is, identify something like cybersecurity, which is probably going to be the biggest problem that we're going to face over the coming years. So identify an area where you would like to go into post your qualification, or when you have time to do that, and then focus on just that, even if you are not necessarily doing it on a full-time basis as part of your role. But I would encourage you to, if any one of you has tried to venture into these spaces, you will see there's so much information that is available. There's free courses that are available to you that you can just spend time pursuing. There's cheap courses that are available to you as well. So if you are, for example, trying to get into cybersecurity, you could be an auditor, but just take up a few courses online or whatever, or short courses, and then you begin to go into that space. I think for me, that would be probably number one. Identify an area that you would want to go into if that's your thing, because as a profession, we believe that, like all the information that I was mentioning to you earlier, it's things that we actually believe. We believe and we have seen that business expects CAs to tell them what to do. So you are going to be expected, maybe not now, but you can understand if you go into an environment where the leader is a CA, then you are going to have to tell that leader what they need to in turn tell business. And when we say we are trusted advisors, it's because that's what business wants from us. Some businesses are already frustrated that their CAs don't seem to understand what's happening or what's basically going on. I know there's a bank or two that was very angry with SAICA because basically the people that they're getting are not basic market ready, let's call it. So mine would be, you need to understand, you need to identify where you would like to go, and make sure that you are ready for this. It's so difficult keeping up with this. I mean, I'm fortunate that I have to do it it's part of my job, but I can just imagine if you're a professional and you've got a full-time job, maybe a family, etc., and you have to try and keep up with all of these things. It's really not easy. But I would say find a way, call it risk-based, just find a way to try and keep up so that you're ready yourself. And if you need to understand that there are going to be questions that even the business doesn't understand, you are going to need to help shape those questions. And that's why the qualification process has changed so drastically, because some of the problems that you're going to need to solve, nobody really knows about currently. If you can be ready for that, then I think you'll be good. I don't know if that helps, but I think that's my response.
All right, it does. Thank you.
All right. Is there any other comment or question?
Msizi?
Yes.
Yes, it's Larry here. So from my side, it's just really around ethical issues and regulations. But I think you covered most of it, but those are really my concerns around the topic that we had tonight, So I'm still not really clear around the ethical issues and the regulations around this, And I can't just get into it and see how ethically it can be because of the issues you had mentioned. You mentioned around discriminations and the likes. Yeah. Okay, go on.
Yeah, no, you can continue. Sorry, I was just trying to see if I understood your question.
So it's actually a comment, but
okay.
Yeah, I think you covered it, but I still need to get into it and just see if
okay. Yeah.
I can just be aligned in terms of how the ethical issues and the discriminations around this work and the regulation, of course. Yeah, but otherwise, yeah, it was a very insightful session, and thank you very much.
The pleasure. Yeah, no, it's really that's why I called it governance headaches, because some of these problems I don't think we are even ready to try and solve. They are so big. But yeah, no, please feel free to explore some more. This was just to spark some conversation or some thought, to show you where the profession is trying to go. And that, of course, understanding that you still need to get ready for the APC. But I'm hoping that this helps you beyond just the APC, and it adds value to your entire lives as a professional. Certainly. And again, if you look at this is all opportunities for us. All of these headaches that are out there, all of these ethical issues that are out there, you can look at that and say, there's an opportunity for me here. There's a lot of businesses that need to be created that are just sitting there in this one slide. Right, is there any other comment? Okay, if there's no other comment, I don't know if we can end it there. Yep.
Yes. Good evening, Susie.
Mhm. Right.
It's really a wonderful to really have you in the session. An interesting question in one of the comments on the chat, and this just reminded me back to varsity. The question was that what are your thoughts on the courses at varsity that focus on accounting information system? On the back of my mind, I remember we used to do a course called Control in Information Systems.
Yes.
And one could get to ask ourselves that, Msizi, you having gone through these different platforms which we're having, especially with the digital world evolving, how do you believe that that evolution which is coming through, how then does one, as ourselves, I think in the group we have got different groups. We've got APC candidates. We also have mentors who could have been qualified for a year or even 10 years. So is that part of saying that, how do you believe when you take it back? I think also to the comment where you're saying that some of the banks are showing concerns of saying how is SAICA and the competency framework empowering someone to become that digital acumen or grounded professional. So what is your take on that?
Sure, that's a question and a half. So I remember that course, CF, whatever it was, those information systems courses. My personal opinion, and this is not a SAICA, so SAICA has a competency framework, and the competency framework basically obviously guides you what you need to develop by the time you qualify as a chartered accountant. And this is done in stages, and there's then the guidance that says this part will be developed at university and this part will be developed at the training program. And then this is the extent that we think, because some things will be done on both sides. This is the extent that you will go in the academic program and the training program as well. So without a doubt, what needs to happen, or what is already happening, because I know a lot of, not a lot, but some of the universities or institutions are trying to change those courses because they are now quite outdated. There's definitely a lot of change that is needed in the academic program itself. I know I am involved in one academic program still, and I know it's a major to try and teach some of these things, because some of these things are not really easy to teach to students, or especially to students who have such a loaded syllabus. So practically, it is not easy, but I think there are certain things that are being done already. There's probably a longer way to go still for most of the institutions. So I don't think while the competency framework, the implementation has progressed in a somewhat significant way, I don't think it is where it is, especially from the academic program or at the academic program level. But again, understanding where the academic program comes from, because they need to bring in people that come from what I think most educationalists agree is a less than desirable education system or basic education system. So there's all of these factors that come back to that academic program. And then they need to upskill the people that are coming in, get through whatever SAICA says that they need to get to, and then get people ready for the workplace. Another aspect, which I'm not saying is my opinion, it's just something I'm throwing out there, is the university environment the right place to be doing some of these things. One can argue no, but someone can argue yes. I think if you look at something like, or some of the ways that people become, some of the things that they are becoming today in the tech-driven world, it has very little to do with the university environment. So a person can become an expert in cybersecurity by maybe becoming a hacker, an ethical hacker, and they just start hacking, and then they are an expert in that area. Now we need to teach, again, notwithstanding the other course that you mentioned, or those other courses that we may think are inappropriate. And SAICA, I think from what I understand, SAICA has said, we can't dictate to the university. The university is in its own autonomous, independent institution. They decide what goes into the degree. So SAICA provides the competency framework, the university then decides on the degree, and then they go and do basically implement what they need to. So I feel like I've said a lot of things, and I don't know if I'm answering the question.
No, you have. No, I just wanted to make sure that before we wrap up the session, that you've also responded, because it was one of the comment which came through the chats, which I believe that you could have missed. But otherwise, again, like we said, that we can labor on this topic. Really, it's one of the very topical issue, which it's really continues to evolve, and then it impacts our profession as a whole. But I think one of the aspects which you noted is that it's also an opportunity for us as professionals of saying that how then do we identify the gaps in this evolving environment which we find ourselves in. We must not limit ourselves just because we just CAs, but then we must also become to be those enablers. We must come with ideas of saying that like many other professionals which we have here on the platform are noting that there's still gray areas. There's still a long way to go with those ethical issues. Once you qualify yourselves, how are you then going to give those inputs? How are you going to be standing the gap to make sure that also these wonderful area of digital acumen, it does not also just go to waste, but then we utilize it to the best, because like we're saying that it can either be for the worse off or for the benefit of the profession as a whole. But otherwise, like I said, we can talk throughout the night. First is just to say thank you very much, CZ. It was really great to have you. I was just telling Rendani, I'm so excited to see my classmate, and encouraged to say that though we studied those CFIS, which may not have been relevant, which is not relevant, it was relevant then. It may not be relevant now, but it's that's why at SAICA as well as a professional, you've got that thing called CPD to make sure that you're continuously updated, that you don't get to be relevant with the challenges which the profession and just the environment we operate in is currently facing. But otherwise, again, CZ, thank you very much. And thank you very much for everyone who has joined us. This is the end of the session. We continuously just also encourage you guys that this part, Rendani, before he called it a night, he was like, this part where we're talking about the digital acumen, it goes back again to say that this is part of the business acumen, because it's one of the pillars of also when you go there to research. I think also Gracious on the candidate conversation, she was saying that, you know what, you can't just go there on ChatGPT and just type anything when you're trying to do your research. You need to be focused, you need to be relevant. And similarly, you also need to also apply those professional skills and due care for the information which you get, of saying that how you're going to utilize it in an ethical manner, in a manner of integrity, which will also show that you're a professional who cares for the environment you operate in. So also take this session as part of when you go through, when the pre-release comes out on Friday, utilize it for that. And also for our mentors, I believe this is one of the part of the CPD. So we shall be clocking this almost 2 hours in CZ. As part of our CPD. We're truly grateful, and good night, everyone. Truly appreciate your presence.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.